Hey there, Fletcher from All Things Overlanding here, and today I'm going to be talking about building your own overlanding rig from scratch versus buying a pre-built truck like the Chevy Colorado ZR2 or the Tacoma Trailhunter. There are so many factory options now that are really nicely outfitted for overlanding that there actually is a way to just go and buy one off the lot and take it out and go overlanding. So again, I'm going to talk through a little bit what I think makes a vehicle pre-built and ready to go for overlanding versus what you need to do it yourself. And then I'm going to talk about both of those options and kind of when I think they make sense from my experience in overlanding, so that again, if you are thinking about either buying a vehicle or building a vehicle, you'll have some context for how the pre-built versus the DIY projects compare. So if you want to hear more about building your own overlander versus buying a pre-built overlander, stay tuned.
Where it came from, but you got it, my got it. It began in the land of the sandstorm. I fought it, though I wanted everything to do with what you give to me.
All right, guys, so as I mentioned in the intro today, I'm talking about building your own overlander versus buying an overlander. And let's start with kind of what I think you need to look for in a vehicle to consider it an overland ready truck. So what I mean by this is not buying a used vehicle that's already been built out. That is one way to do it, and you can do that, but there are inherent risks that come with that. Oftentimes, people that are selling those types of rigs are getting away from it because of problems or things that they don't like. Sometimes they have had problems with their setup and they've just decided to go a different way, but most of the time it's because something bad has happened or they've had some trouble with the vehicle or they've had a lack of reliability, let's say, with the vehicle, and they want to go into a different vehicle. So what I'm talking about more today is a perfect example is my Nissan Frontier. I have a 2023 Nissan Frontier Pro 4X. I love it. It's a very capable vehicle, but if we're being honest, they don't come from the factory with a lot of ground clearance, about 9.5 inches. They're just not that overland ready. They require quite a bit of modification to get suspension on them, to fit bigger tires. Sometimes you have to cut, remove mud flaps, melt and or cut fender liners. So there's actually quite a bit that I've had to do to my truck to build it up to the point that it is now where I can really truly kind of take it out and have it be a pretty capable rig for overlanding and off-roading. Whereas there are a lot of factory-made competitors that are extremely well built from the factory and have a ton of really nice options, such as the Chevy Colorado ZR2. That thing, you know, and if I'm wrong on any of this, post up in the comments down below. Feel free to berate me, but I'm going from memory here, just the things that I've seen on these trucks. They come from the factory with 35s. They've got factory lockers, whereas the Frontier only has a rear locker. I believe that the ZR2 has a front and rear locker. Same with the Toyota Tacomas, the higher trim ones like the Trailhunter, they have a front and rear locker. So they're just more capable from the get-go. The Chevys also have like the magnetic ride shocks where you can do some adjusting. They have different drive modes and things like that. Same with the Tacoma. I believe they have different drive modes for snow and rain and sand and that kind of thing. Whereas again, the Frontier is very basic. It's just go. There's not even an eco mode, right? There's no different selectable drive options or anything like that. And again, I'm not trying to bash on the Frontiers. I love my Frontier. I've always been more of a DIY person myself, which is part of why I chose that. And then the other reason is I love the budget mindedness of the Nissan vehicles versus say the Toyotas, for example, and even the Chevys. Those are also significantly more expensive than the Frontier. Knowing that I already have worked on these trucks, I know how to lift them. I know what suspension I was going to go with. I know what wheels and tires I was going to do. And I knew that I could make it, you know, raise up to be more capable for a pretty low price and still be significantly less than the price of those other trucks while maintaining that Nissan reliability. So again, that's kind of what I'm talking about. That's the point of this episode, is to compare those newer purpose-built vehicles that are coming out of these manufacturers that you could literally drive off the lot, not have to worry about lifting, putting tires on it, doing any of that sort of stuff. Just equip it with your rooftop tent or your bed rack or whatever your sleep setup is, and your fridge and that kind of thing, and you're good to go. And a lot of these trucks too nowadays have inverters built into them. Some of them, like the Tacoma, has a built-in air compressor in the rear of it. So, I mean, you can even air up your tires from it without having to buy an air compressor and mount it and do all that stuff. So, you know, there's just so many options on these new trucks that it makes them really capable and really nice out of the factory. So that's what we're talking about today, the difference between those two options, buying just like a sort of typical standard truck versus the really highly modified top trim vehicles like the Ford Ranger Raptor, like the Chevy ZR2, like the Toyota Trailhunter. So let's kind of start start by talking about the DIY option. So again, I chose the Frontier because I'm a Nissan person at heart. I love Nissans. I really like the look of the new Frontier. I like a lot of the options, and the price on it was just kind of unbeatable. The Pro 4Xs go for like low to mid 40s, which makes them a really good steal in the marketplace nowadays compared to, you know, these Chevy ZR2s that can go for 50s, even 60s. Same with the Ranger Raptor, same with the Trailhunters, right? I bought my truck knowing that I was going to have to spend, you know, $3,000 to $6,000 to lift it, put different tires on it, build a drawer system or buy a drawer system, and then all my other gear. But the way I looked at it was, by the time I was done, I would have a mildly lifted vehicle on slightly bigger tires that still gets pretty good gas mileage, is extremely reliable, and for the same money or less than those other factory options that are granted more capable, I'd be able to fully outfit the truck, put a bed rack on it, put a fridge in it, put my rooftop tent in it. So if I had to add everything up that's in my build, I'd say I'm probably around about $50,000 to $52,000 total with the cost of the truck and all the modifications that I've made to it, which again is a lower price than a lot of those trucks were just from the factory. And then you have to add another $5,000 to $8,000 worth of gear to that truck just to get it to the level that mine is at from a build standpoint as far as modifications go. So that's why I went that route. Again, being a Nissan person helped, but then knowing that I love to build the trucks, I love to modify them, I love to pick my own bumper, I love to make it unique. I don't want to just have that same truck that anyone else could go to the lot and spend the money on and buy. So I like that my Nissan Frontier was stock, but now a year and a half later is pretty heavily modified with a unique Z1 off-road bumper and a Z1 off-road snorkel and the T-Laps cab rack and an open road rooftop tent. And like, I was able to build it out the way I want instead of just saying, thanks Chevy, thanks Ford, thanks Toyota for doing this for me, right? Some other benefits to doing the DIY approach are that aside from just the cost savings and the ability to outfit it and make it really unique for your own build, you also can pick vehicles that, you know, a lot of times people wouldn't necessarily associate with overlanding. Like, again, everybody sees the Ford Ranger Raptor and they go, that would be a really rad off-roading and overlanding truck. Or they see the Toyota Tacoma Trailhunter and they say, that would be a really rad purpose-built overlanding truck that I just need to put a bed rack on and a rooftop tent and I'm good to go, right? So that opens up a ton of options and a ton of uniqueness. And maybe that's not important to you. And if that's the case, then, you know, when we talk here in a little bit about the factory made options, that may be a better option for you. But I personally like to kind of, I feel like the vehicle that I drive kind of represents my personality. I build a vehicle and I build it in a way that I'm proud of. I build it in a way that is unique. I build it in a way that stands out. And I love it when other folks come up, whether they're Nissan folks or non-Nissan folks, and they're like, hey, what's that? What'd you do with that? Why is that like that? What'd you do there? That, to me, the opening of conversations and the being able to hang out with other people that are into this hobby, and for them to say, that's really cool that you built your own tilting drawer slide. I like that you did that. That's neat. Versus like, oh, you have the bumper with the winch in it from the factory. That's cool. Me too. You know? So for me, that was another thing, is that it's a way to express yourself, right? It's a way to make your vehicle unique and make it one that represents you. And again, like, there are Subaru people out there that a lot of the times, a lot of friends of mine that have Subarus are like, well, we're the kind of the underdogs and we just can't do as much as the other guys. But like, some of these Subarus are extremely capable. They get fantastic gas mileage. If you're going 8-10 hours away and I have to stop every 3 hours for gas and they can go 5 hours between gas stops, that's a pro for them. So being able to be unique, being able to choose a vehicle that, again, not a lot of people would select for overlanding, I think is a pro. I think that's really cool to be able to have something unique and something different and to be able to pick literally any vehicle that you want. There are some people that are overlanding in Priuses, and I think that's cool as hell. I think it's neat that they can get really crazy gas mileage. They build like some built-ins into a lot of those where they sleep in the car so they can do some stealth camping and things like that. So I think that that's kind of fun. If you're looking for more of a purpose-built, there's really a very limited number of vehicles that fit that bill. So you are kind of tied into just having a few options if you're going to go that route, which is kind of a con of that and a pro of the do-it-yourself. All right, so now let's move over to the more purpose-built, sort of factory-made overlanding vehicles, if you will. And again, having talked just now about the DIY ones and being able to pick unique things like Subarus or Priuses and things like that maybe wouldn't be viewed as capable as some of these trucks, which is definitely true. It is going to limit some of the places that you can go. The truck trucks that I'm going to talk about here are the ones that are really, they're almost more tilted towards the off-roading than the overlanding. But again, as we all kind of know, as much as we want to say, man, my Subaru with a 1-inch lift or a 2-inch lift could go do Black Bear Pass and do all these things, it's possible that it could do some of that stuff. But a purpose-built truck with larger tires, with lockers, with more ground clearance, it's just going to have an easier time doing it, right? My second gen Frontier that I have that's Titan swapped and on a really big lift with 35-inch tires will run circles around my newer Frontier that's just on a 2-inch lift with 33s, right? They're both great trucks in their own right, but the purpose-built vehicle will be able to go more places than the other one. So you just have to adjust your expectations a little bit and adjust your trips and kind of where you want to go based on which one you go with. But again, I'm just trying to preface this whole talking about purpose-built because I know a bunch of you are going to go to the comments and be like, you don't need a big old lifted ZR2 Colorado to go overlanding. And that's 100% true. Again, I'm talking about these things that literally manufacturers like Chevy, Ford, Toyota are saying, we hear you people. We hear that you guys are all taking these trucks and then you're lifting them and you're putting bigger tires on them and you want a winch and you want steel bumpers and you want lockers, right? They're saying that, and then they're building the trucks to already have those things on them with a factory warranty for people like me and you, right? That want those options on vehicles and want to be able to take something far out and far away and not have to modify it. But so let me just list out a handful of them here. I've already talked about a few of them. The Chevy Colorado ZR2. There's also the Canyon, whatever the version of that is that's comparable. That's a really sharp looking truck. The Ford Ranger Raptor, of course, is in that ballpark. The Toyota Trailhunter, obviously the same with the 4Runner. 4Runner and Tacoma are both going to be, in that ballpark. There's a ton of SUVs, right? There's just a ton of SUVs out there that are kind of purpose-built like that. Things like the GXs, the Prados, I've already mentioned the 4Runner, the Subaru Outback Wilderness, right? While it may not have as much ground clearance as the rest of these, it is literally purpose-built to get out further, to get out farther and explore. It comes from the factory with a larger lift, bigger tires, right? It comes with some of these things. It's not quite as purpose-built as like the ZR2 or the Ranger Raptor or the Trailhunter, but it's still a trim from Subaru that is intended for people to take overlanding and off-roading. So all of those are awesome vehicles, right? So let's talk about pros and cons for those. Now that we've kind of laid out the groundwork for what's what. The pros obviously are warranty, right? Like that's one of the biggest thing that we all worry about. I have, my truck is a 2023. I do have about 23,000 miles on it now, but I've still got another year and a half worth of warranty or another 12 to 14,000 miles on it before I run out of warranty. But I have already hacked up my fender liners. I've hacked a little bit out of my wheel wells from the metal standpoint to make my 33s fit without rubbing. I've got all these things. I've hacked up my front bumper to put a steel Z1 bumper on it. I put a snorkel on it, which required me to replace my factory airbox and drill a giant hole in my fender, right? So all these modifications, right? All these modifications risk warranty. And that is one of the biggest, scariest things, especially if you're like, in my opinion, I'm getting a little bit older now. I'm 44, 10-15 years ago, I was hacking everything up. I didn't care about warranty. I'll just do my own work. I'll do it in my garage. I'll replace a clutch. I'll replace a transmission, whatever it takes, right? But nowadays, I'm getting a little bit older, and I am starting to see the value of some of these purpose-built trucks, and I kind of, totally understand, like, man, it would just be nice to go down to the dealership, buy a Colorado ZR2, throw a bed rack on it, a rooftop tent, and throw a fridge in the bed and be done. Right? Like that would be really nice and really easy. And then I know I have a warranty for 3 years or 36,000 miles, and I just don't have to worry about it, right? And also sometimes the more you modify vehicles, often that can lead to more problems, right? It could cause problems. If you're really heavily modifying a vehicle, sometimes those modifications don't work well with other modifications. Sometimes there are, reliability problems that can happen from that. I mean, if you think about it, the snorkel, I had to drill a giant hole. I painted around that. I tried to resist as much rust as I could, but it's very likely that my truck with the giant hole cut in the fender for my snorkel, not from the factory, is going to have more of a chance of having some sort of rust problems down the road or some sort of issues because of that modification versus like if you are Chevrolet and you're building a truck with a built-in snorkel, they're just going to cut that hole from the factory and then paint over it, and you're not going to have to worry as much about those corrosion issues or the rust, right? So that is one of the biggest things I think is the warranty. That is a huge plus of these vehicles. Another pro is, again, and I kind of just touched on it, is just reliability. Like these there's a team of engineers engineers that worked together to build these trucks. And they looked at all the modifications and how they would work together. And they said, these work. And they tested them. And after that testing, they said, this is the approved version, that we aren't worried about coming back a bunch for warranty work because that's going to cost us money. This is a reliable way to build this truck. Whereas, again, I'm sitting here and I'm watching videos on YouTube and I'm going, I want that snorkel and I want that bumper and I want to put those tires on those wheels and I want to do that to my bumper. And you know what I mean? Like, I'm just a guy that's making my own decisions and mismatching a bunch of stuff and hoping that it all works together. So, there is that to be said too, that you should have harmony with the parts that are on the vehicle because it came from the manufacturer. Other pros are just simplicity, right? So what I mean by that is, I've got ditch lights. I've got a light bar in my bumper. I've got all these different lights. I've got all these different things running through a dual battery setup. I've added a fair amount of complexity to make my build what I need it to be for overlanding. But with something like just buying a truck off the lot with fog lights and maybe, let's say, ditch lights or roof lights or some sort of a light bar or something in it, a lot of the times they're going to build that right in, right? And you're just going to have factory OEM switches somewhere that are in a good spot, that are easy to find, easy to use. You didn't have to cut holes or push wires through your firewall. It's just easier and it's a little cleaner look, right? So you get this vehicle that's already made and modified well for you. Another thing that's kind of nice, and it's a little weird to say this because I'm typically not a payments guy. I don't really like to have car payments. And if I do, I would rather buy like a used vehicle and save the depreciation and save money. But one of the positives of buying one of these newer vehicles is the ability to finance it. So let's say that you buy a Chevy Colorado ZR2, and let's just say it's a $65,000 truck and you put $10,000 down. That's about a $55,000 vehicle. That typically, and interest rates are a little different now than when I used to sell cars years ago, but that would probably be around a $1,300 a month payment. So it's a hefty payment, right? It's an expensive payment. However, you are getting a purpose-built truck for that payment. So if you say, I make $4,000 a month and I can easily handle $1,300 a month for my truck payment, then you can just finance that versus buying a lower priced car, having, let's say, a lower payment. Let's say you buy a Frontier or something and it's $800 a month. Then you still have to say, I want a rooftop tent that costs $3,000, let's say, and I'm saving $500 a month on my car payment. So I need to save for 6 months before I can buy that rooftop tent with the cash that I've saved and the difference between the Chevy Colorado and the Frontier. Right now, and this is a hypothetical, right? The rooftop tent is not a requirement. It's not something that comes on the Chevy ZR2, but I'm just saying, if you bought a cheaper vehicle and you only were able to finance the cost of the vehicle, then you have to pay for all the other modifications and stuff you have to make versus just being able to roll them into your payment like with a ZR2 or a Ranger Raptor or a Trailhunter. So that is kind of a pro. That's kind of a pro that you can just finance it. Now, the con side of that is they're more expensive, right? So again, like a Trailhunter is like low to mid $60,000 truck, which is significantly more expensive than the top trim Frontier Pro 4X, right? Which again, it was why in my mind, I made that decision. And at the very end, I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I'm going to bring this all together with kind of why I did that and why I think it makes sense and then when it might make sense to do the other way. But it is a negative that you are going to spend more money buying these higher trim vehicles. Another con that kind of goes hand in hand with the stuff that I was talking about in the DIY is, again, you're buying a cookie cutter truck, right? So if you have the top trim Trailhunter Tacoma, your Trailhunter Tacoma is going to look just like everybody else's Trailhunter Tacoma, right? There's not a ton of customizability you can do from the factory versus like picking from 8 different bumpers and 8 different rear bumpers and 8 different sets of sliders or more, right? And having all these options and be able to really customize it to your liking. You're just getting what Toyota or Ford or Chevy said was the top trim of this truck. So if you're bothered by that, then it may not be as much fun. It may not be as good of an option for you. So let's kind of wrap this whole episode up with kind of my final thoughts about when I think each makes sense, right? So again, part of it, and this is not to sound ageist at all, but I'm talking about myself here, right? I'm mid-40s now. And 10, 15 years ago, I had a Nissan 350Z that I bought used off of a dealer lot. And then, I did everything to that. I lowered it, I slammed it, I did chassis bracing, I did all these modifications to this car to really, truly make it my own. And it was up on jack stands almost every weekend in my garage, unless I was taking it to the autocross course. Same with my Jeep Cherokee that I had. That was the first 4-wheel drive that I ever had, was a Jeep Cherokee. I loved working on that thing. For me, it was a lot of fun to work on that vehicle, and I didn't have a lot of money. So being able to find used parts parts and slap those things on there and kind of, building Frankenstein pieces out of bits and pieces of OEM stuff that you got off other Jeeps or other Nissans or that sort of thing is kind of fun. So if you're a younger person and you're more into like customization and really being unique and you really want that vehicle to be something that nobody else has, then obviously the DIY route is going to be better for you. If you are, potentially older, doesn't necessarily have to be older. You could just be someone that doesn't like to do modifications, doesn't know how to work on cars, doesn't want to work on cars for whatever reason. Then buying a stock vehicle is obviously going to save you a ton of time. It's going to cost you more money, but it's going to save you a ton of time. It's going to get you out on the trails quicker, which is another pro. So if you are like, I don't want to take the next 2, 3, 6 years building my truck. I mean, that is one thing that has been a standard for me with all my builds is I'm still building them right up until I sell them. Right. I'm still making changes. I'm still adding things. I'm taking one set of suspension off. I'm putting a different one on. I'm changing shocks. I'm lifting it more. I'm putting bigger tires on. I went from ATs to MTs to RTs on my Xterra. So like with the DIY way, it's if you enjoy that, and if you enjoy the constant changing and if you enjoy working on it yourself, it can be a lot of fun. So typically I would say that's the younger folks or the folks with less money, which has been me until very recently, right? Not that I have a ton of money now, but I am a little bit older and a little bit more financially secure than I was 20 years ago for sure. But so that could be appealing. If you are more that type of person, then buying the pre-built vehicle is obviously going to be a little bit more appealing. Now, I also think with modifications, that kind of lines up too. There are ways to, again, like I said earlier, go online, Google, YouTube, watch a bunch of stuff, pick the bumper you want, pick the bed rack you want, pick the rooftop tent you want. You can go out and kind of piecemeal those things and then amalgamate them all together into a Frankenstein build like all of my builds have always been. Or there are also options like, an Expedition Vehicle Outfitters up in Michigan, Ken Farley, his shop, or, Commonwealth 4x4 down in Kentucky, places like that that are very good at asking the right questions, having the industry knowledge that you can go to and you can say, hey, look, I bought this brand new Chevy Colorado ZR2. I want to do these type of trips to these states, these places, these types of trails. Here's kind of my goals. Here's my budget. And then they can make recommendations for you and basically take it from there and build the whole thing for you. So again, if you're older like me, if you've got enough money for that, I do not. But if you have enough money for that you can just go to a shop and say, here's 50 grand or whatever. I want you to make this thing a monster truck. You can do that. Okay. Same with modifications, just like with the vehicles. But so again, I think that the purpose-built ones are more for people that want reliability. They don't want to do a lot of their own work. They want to get out sooner. Maybe they don't have the timeline to slowly build a vehicle. Maybe they're getting ready to retire. Hence why it's generally typically older people. If I was 60, let's say, and I was going to retire tomorrow, I wouldn't want to spend the next 2 years building my vehicle just to then get out at 62. I'd rather just go to the dealership, buy the top of the line vehicle and outfit it really quickly and then be on the road exploring, right? Whereas like if you are, again, more budget minded and younger, then you could do the other route. So those are kind of my thoughts on which one makes the most sense for what. I hope that was helpful for you. Definitely, I'm sure that a bunch of you guys have ideas and questions and things flowing through your mind. Maybe there are some things that I missed. Post up in the comments down below and let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking if I missed anything. Maybe you disagree with something. That's fine. Or maybe you do agree. Post up in the comments down below and let me know what you think. Click that like button if you got value out of the video. If you're listening on the podcast, leave a 5-star review for the podcast. That helps a ton. Add it to your favorites. Of course, like always, in the description down below will be links to all my social media channels. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, wherever you want to come hang out. I'd love to hang out with you guys and have you in the comments and engaging over there. There's also a join button below this video if you're watching on YouTube, which is just a passive way to support the channel and also get you early access to the videos and some other perks. So check that out. If you want a more active way to support the channel, whether you're on the podcast or on YouTube, there is a link to my Patreon group down below. This is an awesome group of fellas. This is an awesome group of people that talk 24/7 in a Discord. We have a once-a-month Zoom call, and we're trying to meet up once or twice a year to do in-person trips and just kind of drink a beer around a fire and hang out. So if that sounds good to you, check that out. There's also a link below to my website where I've got funny overlanding camping themed patches and stickers, as well as all things overlanding merch. So if you want any of that, patches, stickers, things like don't burn your wiener and it's a hot dog or an ATO logo patch, all that stuff is going to be through that link down below. And then last but not least, there's the Newbie Overlanders Facebook group. If you are newer to overlanding or if you're more experienced and you're just tired of the bullying in the big groups, that is an awesome place. We have 20,000 members at the time that I'm recording this. So definitely hop into that group. We'd love to have you there and join the conversation. But again, I hope this was helpful for you and we'll see you next time.